It's really a pleasure for me to introduce our next speaker. Charlie Kruse served as Missouri Farm Bureau's president for 18 years from 1992 to 2010. He's a native of Stoddard County, a 1967 graduate of Arkansas State, received his master's degree from the University of Missouri in 1973. His list of accomplishments and accolades are much longer than this brief introduction will allow. You know, you never know what to call Charlie. You can call him president, you can call him general, you can call him director. Just a tremendous career serving America and serving agriculture. But I know that the titles he is most proud of are as husband to Pam, father to Scott and Ben, grandpa to Addie and Andy, and a lifelong farmer from Dexter, Missouri. And the most important thing for me to call him is friend and confidant and mentor. And I want you to know I try not, Charlie's retired, and so I don't think he wants to hear from me once a week or even once a month, but he does hear from me, and I look forward to our conversations. I always end up with a smile, I always end up with some good advice, and I always am reminded of how much we all owe Charlie Kruse for his long service to our organization, our industry. Please help me welcome Charlie Kruse.
Well, Blake, thank you very much. It's a great honor for me to be asked to say a few words at this 100th year celebration of Missouri Farm Bureau. And Blake, I appreciate the opportunity. It's an honor for me to share this podium this morning with Blake, who I served with for a number of years on the state board, with Bob Stallman, who I was privileged to serve with as state president on the American Farm Bureau board, American Farm Bureau Executive Committee. Bob's been a great leader for American Farm Bureau and continues to be. And we're going to hear later this morning from our dear friend Senator Roy Blunt, who has been a leader in so many of the issues that we've worked on through the years. I can remember shortly after Roy went into Congress, we were working really hard, and many of y'all will remember this. We were trying to get the boundaries changed on the milk marketing orders. It was really important for the state of Missouri. And those of you that worked on that back then know full well, Roy Blunt literally got that done. We were successful with it. And he pulled the wagon for us, and he's been pulling the wagon for us ever since. So, real honor. It was great this morning to go to the promotion education breakfast. Diane Olson talked about how great our ambassador program is, introduced our two new ambassadors, talked about our promotion and education committee. But I wanted to also, as Paul Harvey would say, tell the rest of the story. And the rest of the story, as many of you know, Diane Olson was the person that had the vision to change our women's committee to a promotion and education committee, and to change what at the time we had as our Queen contest to our ambassador contest. And at the time, one of the nicest, sweetest ladies any of us have ever met, Betty Stolte, was the chairman of the Women's Committee. And Betty was so supportive of doing this, and look where we are now. What a great program. The ambassador program has been so fantastic, and the Promotion and Education Committee, and we've had a lot of state farm bureaus because of what happened here in Missouri Farm Bureau, who have decided they want to really think about having a Promotion and Education Committee and an ambassador program. We can be very, very proud of that. As we come together to celebrate this 100th year, I can't help but think what it was like at that first meeting. And I was sitting here this morning wondered who was responsible at that first meeting in 1915 to tell everybody to make sure they turned their phones off. I could picture them carrying those old crank phones on their shoulders, and they had to turn them off. But, you know, I know we all think, and it's so neat to read the history and so neat to look at all these pictures, and you wonder why these people decided it was important to come together. Well, it was probably the understanding that there's strength in numbers, and working together, they could accomplish a whole lot more than working by themselves. And that's been the case ever since. Sure, the issues were different then than they are today, but the purpose was the same. Join together and work together for the good of agriculture in rural Missouri. Yeah, they had problems just like we have problems today. They had issues. And they were different issues than we have today. And they knew what hard times were. And they struggled just like we've struggled. You know, my grandpa told me a story several times that I just was amazed at, and he told it, and he would laugh about it. But, you know, right after the Depression, there wasn't a whole lot to laugh about. But my grandpa told me about he sold a rail car load of calves and loaded them on a rail car in Poplar Bluff and shipped them to St. Louis. And he said about a week later, he got a letter from the stockyards that said, "Dear Mr. Kruse, this is to inform you that your calves didn't bring enough money to pay the freight." And it told how much money he owed for the freight up there. And he said, "You know what? I sat down and wrote him a letter back and said, I don't have any money, but I'll be glad to send you some more calves." You know, in 100 years, a lot of things happen, and a lot of things change. As I was thinking about this morning, I thought about some things. Just think about, what if those people at the first meeting, what if somebody stood up in the group and said, "You know what? I'm going to tell you, 100 years from now, we're going to be told that we can't plant crops on certain land. We can't grow livestock on certain land because it might hurt a little plant or a little mouse or some other critter. And we're not going to be able to do that." What about 100 years ago if somebody stood up and said, "You know what, 100 years from now, we're going to be criticized for taking care of our livestock the way we were taught, the common sense way. And we're going to be told that we're cruel for doing that." What about 100 years ago if somebody stood up and said, "You know, 100 years from now, there are going to be people that are going to fine us for dredging sand and gravel out of creek beds so the water can flow"? I think by this time, they'd have probably drugged that person out and had them committed to a mental institution. But sadly, that's where we are today, isn't it? But you know, all this has come to pass, and I think, as has been discussed here this morning, where would we be if it weren't for Farm Bureau? Where would we be if we didn't have an organization that stood up and tried to speak about some common sense? How about if somebody stood up 100 years ago and said, "You know what, instead of these teams of mules and horses and these old tractors we've got now, someday we're going to have tractors that are going to have these compartments on them. They're going to call them cabs. And they'll keep you cool in the summertime and keep you warm in the winter, and the air's clean." Man, won't that be neat? A few years ago, my dad lived to to be 2 weeks from 99 years old. He died in 2009. When he got into his 90s, he didn't come to the farm as much as he did at one time, but Pam or I wanted to call him because he wanted to know what was going on. Well, one morning I called him in the spring. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, right now I'm sitting here waiting for John Deere to come and fix my air conditioner." As soon as I said that, I thought, man, I probably provided him with a little more information than he needed. So there was this long pause, and then I really realized I'd messed up and there wasn't anything I could do about it. Finally, my dad said, "You know, son, I can remember the time an air conditioner wouldn't have kept us from planting corn." Yep. You know, back then and today, Missouri Farm Bureau has always been involved in shaping policy. More than any organization I know. Think about the time we spend. Think about the time we spend making policy happen. You know, it started years ago with working closely and making sure the university extension was successful. We had a Get Out of the Mud campaign to try to build roads in rural Missouri. Missouri Farm Bureau has been involved in every tax policy this state's ever known, including one of the most important ones that limits the amount of tax that can be imposed on people in this state without a vote of the people. Farm Bureau made that happen, and that is so important. So many other things in all that we've done, all that we worked for. All the things that we have done as an organization have been done to improve the quality of life for people that live and work in rural Missouri. Back then and today as well, Farm Bureau has always spent an enormous amount of time on the issues important to us. You know, think about this. Isn't it amazing that people can gather in a coffee shop in a little town somewhere in this state and over a cup of coffee talk about something that's important, and the next thing you know, it's discussed at a County Farm Bureau annual meeting or board meeting. It's developed into a proposed policy, and it moves up to the state level, becomes policy at the state level, then goes to American Farm Bureau, and it all started with a few people having a cup of coffee and talking about something that needs to be done. That's Farm Bureau. That's the common sense and the wisdom of Farm Bureau. And that is what makes us strong and what makes our voice heard so loudly in the halls of the Capitol in Jefferson City and in Washington, D.C. When I think of my time back as president of Missouri Farm Bureau, it brings back so many wonderful memories. I can remember when I was director of agriculture, I came to Jefferson City, and I didn't know much about Jefferson City. And Dick Johnson was president of Missouri Farm Bureau at the time. And Dick Johnson and Ralph Smith and Bob Height-Susan and Estel Fretwell took me under their wing and mentored me. Dick Johnson was one of the finest mentors I ever had. And the thing I admired about Dick, and many of you all will remember this, Dick Johnson had a saying, "You just do whatever you're big enough to do." And that's how he lived life, and that's how he operated Farm Bureau. And he just wade right into the middle of issues and do whatever it took to get them done. Well, when I became state president, I really learned a lot more about Missouri Farm Bureau. I already knew a lot of people by that time around the state, but I learned that Missouri Farm Bureau is made up of the most wonderful, caring, good people you could ever want to meet in your life, all over this state. Great leadership and people that were committed to really making good things happen and making a difference. And I also learned Missouri Farm Bureau was blessed and continues to be blessed with these great people who work for Missouri Farm Bureau, for all of us. The home office people, regional coordinators, county secretaries, and our agency force people, just great dedicated people that really care about the organization. You know, it's one thing to have people who have a job, but they really don't care about that job. It's another thing to have people who really, really do care. And we've got so many people in Missouri Farm Bureau, as we all know, who really, really care. All of you in this room and everybody around the state made me so very proud to get the opportunity to lead this organization. You know, as you all know, we, Missouri Farm Bureau, are one of only 4 states that are a one-state operation on our insurance side of things. In other words, we own all of our insurance companies. There are only 3 other states that can say that: Tennessee, Indiana, and Michigan. And I can remember during the time I was state president, I had several occasions where people from other states would come to me and say, "We really want to talk to you about buying your insurance companies. You know, you can't survive anymore as a one-state operation." And I just think I accidentally fell into the right answer the first time I had that mentioned to me, because I said, well, you know what? We may be swimming upstream, but we're swimming, and we're going to keep swimming, and we're going to continue to be a one-state operation. And I hope we always continue to be, because I have seen, and you all have too, some bad things happen organizationally when a state no longer controls their own destiny. And I'm so thankful, as I know you all are, that we do control our own destiny here in Missouri Farm Bureau. And you know, we take for granted, because we all take for granted that things are, however things are here, that's like they are everywhere else. Well, we are so blessed that we have such a great relationship between our insurance side of the house and our federation side of the house. You have a membership drive in a county, our insurance folks are going to be there shoulder to shoulder. Have an event at a county fair, have any kind of a social event, have any kind of activity, our insurance folks are right there and glad to be there. And that isn't the case in a lot of states. And it's a whole lot different. And we're blessed in that regard. You know, in my annual meeting address, standing right here in 2001, less than 3 months after this country had been brutally and morbidly attacked, with the planes flying into the World Trade Center, our Pentagon, and some heroes taking another plane down in Pennsylvania that might have been headed to the Capitol building or the White House. And I remember talking that day about the fact that, and we'll all remember this, you know, people came together. I think part of it was out of fear. But our country came together, people came together. And, you know, unfortunately, for a short time, it was almost like it was okay. Even the national media, even Dan Rather, seemed to think it was okay for people to pray in public. And it was okay to honor our flag. It was okay to thank God for our blessings. It was okay to speak to our neighbors. And I remember saying then, and you know, a lot of people had to learn how to do all that. But not us, not Farm Bureau. We'd never forgotten it. Just like today, we start every meeting with a prayer. We start every meeting standing up and honoring our flag. And we not only speak to our neighbors, we take care of our neighbors. every one of us could stand up right now and tell a story about how our neighbors have helped us and how we've helped our neighbors. And we don't think about it. It just comes naturally. It says a lot about who we are. It says a lot about what we are. As we look to the future of Missouri Farm Bureau, yeah, there's going to be a lot of changes. You wonder what Missouri Farm Bureau is going to look like down the road in the future? It's hard to say. And you know, sometimes, especially in today's world, it's hard not to sometimes think, boy, is there any hope for the future? What are our children and our grandchildren what kind of world are they going to live in? And these doubts sometimes kind of consume us. But you know what? Just as we built on the foundation that Farm Bureau people left us, people in the future, 40, 50, 60 years from now, when Missouri Farm Bureau meets, those people will have built on the foundation that all of us have left them. And when I really start wondering what the future is going to be like, you see these young, really sharp people competing in an ambassador program. You see our collegiate Farm Bureau young people. You see our FFA kids and 4-H kids. And you think, you know, we're going to be all right. We've got a lot of bright people and a lot of really, really sharp young people that are going to be stepping into the shoes we fill today, and they're going to do a great job. And that's something that we can all be proud about. I think back to my time as state president, and I was so lucky in so many ways. But I was thinking while Bob Stallman was up here talking, you know, during the time I was on the American Farm Bureau Board, the majority of the state presidents who were on the board and I served with never had the privilege or the opportunity to have somebody from their state be the chairman of the American Farm Bureau Young Farmer and Rancher Committee. And we've had a lot of chairmen over the years of the American Farm Bureau Young Farmer and Rancher Committee. During my time on that state board, on the American Farm Bureau board, the first year I was on the board, Richard Fordyce was the American Farm Bureau Young Farmer and Rancher Chairman. He's the Director of Agriculture today. We can be proud of that. And it's almost like bookends, because very close to the end of my career, Chris Chin was the chairman of the American Farm Bureau Young Farmer and Rancher Committee. Well, you talk about proud. I would tell some of my buddies that they should be jealous, because Chris Chin belonged to all of us. And they were jealous. They should have been. But, yeah. Well, in closing, as we celebrate the 100th year of Missouri Farm Bureau, we don't know what the future holds. But we do know this: just as Farm Bureau has been a very decisive leading force in the past, the same will be true in the future. And I want you all to know, Pam and I look back on our time getting to serve this organization. I look back on my time that you all gave me the privilege and the honor to serve as your president. And I want you to know it's one of the greatest honors that I've ever had in my whole life. Thank you very much, and God bless you.